and welcome back to the Pot of Gold podcast, where we talk about wealth generation, finances, and real estate investing with the objective of helping people in their 9-to-5 learn how to become an entrepreneur so that they can own their own time and build a life that they don't want to retire from. So today's guest, Kevin Schouweiler, is a world-class executive and leadership coach. Kevin has coached thousands of people to level up in habits, routine, mindset, and how they lead. With over a decade of experience in executive coaching, having led 7, 8, and 9-figure real estate investors to new heights, Kevin will not hold back in sharing what's made a difference in creating next-level results in business, real estate investing, and success. With over 6 years in multifamily and affordable housing development and operations, Kevin brings a wealth of knowledge that spans the gap from leadership coaching, mindset, and peak performance for savvy entrepreneurs, high-performing professionals, and real estate investors. Kevin, it is a genuine pleasure to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Man, good to be here.
Like I said, glad to have you. I'm really excited to get into this and find out exactly how your journey led you to where you're at. Were you always an entrepreneur, or did you start out as a 9-to-5 person in corporate world?
Great question. So I've had many chapters, which we'll touch on today. Started out W-2. I did go to college. I didn't finish college. Got about 3 years in and told myself I was going to just take a year off. The plan was, okay, I'll get into finance, but what if I went and got a job? So I already have some experience so that when somebody looks at the resume and then I have job experience with it, I'm going to stand up higher against the competition that are just coming out of college with no experience. Fast forward, I never went back for that extra year. Kind of liked what I wanted to do actually a little bit more. But the W-2 stuff, I started out there and I always had this itch. Now, funny, most entrepreneurs, you'll find that there was breadcrumbs all along the way that was eventually where you're going to end up. And the same was for me. I had a paper out when I was young, but then would sell other things to those customers. I had a cleaning company when I was in my college phase. I was working for a guy and I was like, this guy's he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm selling these accounts. I'm cleaning the account. I'm going to go start my own thing. And then you find out it's really hard to manage employees, especially when they're high school students that don't really take that job seriously. And they leave, let's say, the bank door, because we're a commercial cleaning company. They leave the bank door open. And the next day, the bankers come in. They call me and they're like, Kevin, why is the door open from last night? So I learned really quickly that it's not easy to run a business, but I do like a lot of what goes on with the direction of being owner and where it can go. So we'll touch on a few of that today. But as you mentioned in the bio, currently what I've been doing for many years now is executive coaching. And I've been in that for quite a while. I do have some real estate holdings, other investments. I have more than one business that I have started, some of which just failed, flat on your face. So if you go look in my cemetery or the backyard of all the businesses that were started, there's a lot of ones that, we put to rest. There have been some that have done well into the 7-figure range. I was part of one that went into the 8-figure range. That was with other partners and team members. But the most recent service-based one that I've been operating since 2015 is with marketing and podcast promotion related background. It's a service business. I worked with a lot of big names in the podcast industry, mostly health and wellness and business and marketing, but some other big names. That was a great example where I could be the least knowledgeable. I could be kind of an idiot, but just riding on the back of a wave. If the demand is there, you can do quite well. So I was in podcasting 2015, right when things were kicking off. So you can look like an idiot in some ways, but the market can carry you if you just time the wave right. Not easy to time a wave.
I think it's Alex Hormozy that I learned this from, is that the most important thing you can find is a starving crowd.
Right there. Yep. His hot dog analogy, the hot dog
stand.
Yeah. I love that one. And it's so true. Like, what would I have if I didn't have that demand? I'd probably have another failed business. Something that I started, great idea, but it just didn't go anywhere. But I've done everything from product to software to service-based. So a bunch of different backgrounds. Even, in 6 years in working in real estate. So I had a 6-year W-2 role in working with affordable housing with Missoula Housing Authority. So I was there for many years. And when I came in very quickly into that journey, we had already started as a company or an organization to take some of the development in-house. That happened while I was there, which was a really great experience of not just being in the seat of it being both a service-based company, but it was also part private, part quasi-government. So you got to see like multiple sides to it.
Does that have to do with the FHA, the Fannie Mae kind of stuff?
A little different, but those all feed under, or they're under that umbrella of HUD. So how it works is like you have, HUD, and you have these allocations of government funding that start on a federal level and get allocated to a state level. Then those states get to distribute it from within and say, this is a really watered down explanation of it, but like, where is the best and highest use and how we get those allocations met so that they feed different parts of the state.
And so is that where the money for sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Is that where the money for grant programs is coming from? For people who are doing like first time house buying, things like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. There are also some other players that can feed into it. I was literally just with a client downtown. We were over right across from where the Palace Apartments is here in Missoula, Montana, where I live. A few dozen units, old hotel, was renovated with historic tax credits. And so while there's certain layers of funding that in most like real estate investors world, like you usually have just traditional layers. You bring in some cash, you get some conventional loan, or you might get a Fannie Mae loan. You can have some of those, but there's other layers that could come into play, like tax credits, and that could be more of an IRS supported service or program. What it was working with the housing authority was a really fast look at what it's like to have hundreds of units under management and all that goes on with the appreciation for the unsung hero of property management. It was also a really interesting look at how do you do renovations or new build with all the interesting different programs out there. And one of the biggest takeaways I got from being in affordable housing is to really focus on the mission and how if we're really filling a need, like I talked about with demand, you'll have a lot more grease to the wheels of where you're trying to go. And there's nothing like raising capital when you can also say, here's returns, but also here's impact. Impact, I find, is a much bigger blue ocean or differentiator than if I'm just saying, oh, here's your return's backed by real estate. It's hard and tangible and it's not going away tomorrow. At that point, I'm just being sized up. I'm going to be more of a commodity. If I say, come over here, look at my investment, that person's going to go, well, I got these 6 others that I'll stack it up against. But when I put into the conversation impact and what it could do in communities or individuals and family lives, that's a whole different conversation because we're talking about a different type of return.
That's a pretty human experience or desire that you want to have meaning left behind after you're not here anymore. And how else do you do that except through impact? I like that. It's really interesting. I did a little bit of property management kind of things with a place called Sentinel Field Services for a little stint. They didn't do very well. I think it was 2017 that they laid off me and quite a few other people. But I enjoyed the work that I was doing when I was there, interfacing with vendors and a few other things that we were doing. That's why I was curious about the Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae things because we were involved with those.
Yeah, I had less involvement with that. But some of the other programs that are out there, whether it's a federal level or state level, sometimes it's a local level. You have like community development block grants, CDBG funds that could be allocated from a city level. You could have TIF funds, so tax increment financing that can go on from a city level. All these are going to be big jargon terms that you can go look up after this episode. But I'm just saying it opened up a world of other layers of funding that could help bring a project to life. And if we're just blinded by, well, there's either cash or conventional, and that's the only way we can make this deal work, we're losing out of what else might be out there that's available to make something come together.
You don't have very many options. And so what's that analogy? If everything looks like a nail when all you have is a hammer. And so that's not going to fix a lot of problems because there's a lot of things that you need a different kind of tool to be able to handle than a hammer.
Right. And we were a housing organization that, is a community development organization. There are allocations that can only go to certain designations. I can't just be like Joe Schmo in my basement and I want to, go apply for something. But I might be able to put myself in the path of partnering with another organization that does have the credentials that could put themselves in that path of funding. Together, we might be able to do more than we otherwise could alone. So that's where I'm bringing it up to the listener. While you might not be in a place where you have that designation in a state or local level, you could potentially be bringing a concept to one of those partners. And together you could do more than you otherwise would.
And collaborate.
So to your question, though, of like where I'm at, current business, a lot of what I do is coaching, and I've been in that for several years. So while I still have some of that service-based, like podcast and marketing support, I was lovingly invited into the coaching world a little differently than when I think about where the coaching industry has gone. Some people just put up a shingle and go, now I'm a coach. And that really wasn't my path. I was supporting a client. That client, health and wellness was their focus. They did a little 30-day challenge around no alcohol for 30 days. Take a little break, like a dry January, sober October. And the audience really loved it. With the feedback, we started to look at this more seriously, going, could this be its own program? And fast forward a couple of years into it, the guy that had the podcast, he was operating both the delivery side of a coaching program for entrepreneurs, executives, and CEOs that wanted to put alcohol to the side while working on executive coaching. So you can marry those two worlds together, alcohol-free living and executive coaching. And he just needed support. He was like, I need another coach. You're 7 years sober, Kevin. Would you want to come in and join us in the program as one of the head coaches? And so I got a little nervous. I was like, I don't know what I could offer these folks, but sure, I'll give it a shot. So I came in for a bit and I just loved it. It was it was something I would have never considered had somebody not invited me in to really support a program. And then fast forward, really I now run a few different versions of both alcohol-free living with coaching around that, but also executive coaching and how we can serve others around that in business.
I'm curious of what was going through your head that you would have thought that you didn't have anything to offer people if you had 7 years of sobriety. I mean, I feel like that is a pretty good indicator that you're qualified to help people with something like that.
That's a good, well, I think others that are listening to this could resonate because some may not consider themselves a true leader or a coach or a consultant. They might go, I'm a really great operator. I know I can get a result for myself or what I'm doing. But am I confident that I could give somebody the feedback and advice and know that they are going to get a result?
Okay.
Put a little pressure on me because I'm like, well, I know what I can do. And while I could think that somebody else, if I gave them the right advice, would go out and do it, how do I know that they're going to get that result? And they're paying money. And I definitely don't want to let them down, but how do I know they're going to follow through and get that result?
Mm-hmm.
And I think anyone in a position, whether it's consulting or coaching, like you wouldn't feel good if someone's paying for you to get a result and all your clients are not getting a result. Even if I'm getting them the best advice, are they following through? Are we doing it in a way that's meeting different learning styles? Are we meeting people where they're at, not where they could be? And I just didn't have the evidence in my life that said, of course you could tell everyone else and they're going to get the result. So I was a little nervous. But then fast forward a few dozen clients later into that, I was like, oh yeah, this is working. And people are getting results. Now, for everyone out there, I have coached over 1,000 individuals, which is a lot of people, like one-on-one, not in like some big group Zoom and, oh yeah, we had 100 people show up. Like, no, like one-on-one. And what's interesting is there's a lot of patterns that if you start looking, you can see, looking back over that many of people, you can see the things that are like sabotaging behaviors, frameworks of thought that are holding them back and not serving them. And while they might have slightly different backgrounds or slightly different personalities, there are some things that do allow them to get out of their own way and start getting a new type of result. So some of it isn't about the what to do. It is about who they are showing up as in their identity, who they see themselves to be. It's really the beingness behind the perfect strategy. Because Nathaniel, I could give you the perfect strategy on like growing this podcast, but if internally I'm having some I'm not enough story, and like, who am I? And I don't know. And yeah, I know what to do, but like I have resistance and, I kind of procrastinate on it, or I go too fast, but I'm not really being strategic and zooming out of what's really going to make the best. There's ways I can get in my own way.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I've formed an exercise habit over the last year or so that is the first habit I ever formed on purpose. And I followed some of the systems and frameworks that are given by James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits, in order to do that. I think I went 379 days without missing a day of doing at least 45 minutes of cardio. And some of the things that I learned over the course of that is that at a certain point, there was a shift in the way I saw myself. And so instead of forcing myself to go out and do this thing, it's just like, I'm just a person that exercises. And that was really cool to see how that worked. But there was a lot of resistance up until that point. And so I'm kind of curious. You said something about having a bunch of failed businesses to where you could go in your backyard and find all the remnants or the graves of your dead businesses. Do you think failure in a business or in formation of habits and behaviors is a prerequisite to getting to where you need to be? Is that just the price for entry?
That's a good question. First, if you're going from W-2 into business, there is a bit of a curve, like a learning curve. So I have seen people that have started business number one straight out of W-2. And while they go through that learning curve and it wasn't easy and it didn't really just take off right away, they were able to get it to a level of some success. I don't even like the word success, because it's like some level of profitability, some level of some system and process. Some things are working in product market fit or service market fit. But I would say the majority of folks do have a few slight pivots or completely shut down business one and go on to multiple until they find one that hits. I think that's, in my experience, like those I've coached with that are starting business and try to really go for it, more often than not, they've started more than one thing. So if you give yourself, this first one has to work, I think we're setting ourselves up to not appreciate the learning curve. So if I'm less attached to unless it's a business that I first start with being the home run, so much as how quickly can I get through that learning curve? Now, I would say time-wise, that learning curve on average is anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. But time is not the curve itself. The curve itself comes from, well, now I don't have a stable paycheck. So there's not this like safety net of well-being around resource coming in. And how comfortable am I navigating that? There's elements about self and how I see myself. Some of the learning curve is just some raw tangibles. I love, like you brought up like Alex Hormozy earlier. I love a lot of his stuff because it does break down a lot of these fundamental pieces of like, are we getting market fit? Are we taking into account what is the structure of offer that hits with market? Are we really grasping what marketing and sales get to look like in order for it to be a win? And those skill sets, but also mindset pieces can take a lot. I could give someone the skill sets of sales and marketing, but I would say the biggest factor is how they start to show up as a leader and an entrepreneur and navigating a lot of their emotional, intelligent world.
Okay. I had a really good conversation with my last interviewee about emotional intelligence. So that's really cool that you're also kind of doubling down on the witness for that. I like that.
100%. It's like one of the biggest personal development programs is just starting your own business, because it's going to put all of that stuff in your face that otherwise may not get kicked up as much. Right?
Yeah.
It's like an amplifier. I look at it as like it's going to like pour gasoline on the fire of what's underneath. So if I'm frustrated, anxious, if I'm self-loathing, if I'm glass half empty, if I like, there's a bunch of things that could go on about the I'm not enough story. I'm not perfect. I'm not intelligent. I'm not capable. I'm not significant. I'm not, all these different core unwanted beliefs could get kicked up. There's a ton of stuff in here that entrepreneurship just becomes a personal development program for yourself.
Yeah, I've experienced that firsthand. The interesting thing about that is that while I've gone through all of this intense emotion associated with becoming an entrepreneur, my life has also been more enriched and fulfilled than any other point in my life, just because I'm actively engaged in something that's meaningful. And that is really useful to know as well. I imagine that you went through something similar. Were there particular mindset struggles that you had as you were going forward, building up your business? How did you overcome
still
those?
Currently? I'm not a finished product by any means. I don't think there is a finished product. Like as mentioned in the bio, like I've coached with people at 7 figures and 8 figures and 9 figures, coached a billionaire, and you'll hear it out of my mouth if you hear any of my content. It's kind of like it's idiots all the way up.
Yeah.
The income or like I have a business may be an indicator that there's areas that I do really well, but that doesn't just take away the human element of it. Like we're all human beings with certain character flaws or aspects of our own mindset that we have to grapple with on a regular. So it doesn't just remove the struggle by adding more income or more cash flow or more, even just top line revenue. The thing probably most important to know is as you climb to those different levels, it's actually going to kick up more of it. And which is why those emotional intelligence factors become more important as you start to find some traction. So if I don't get ahead of it when I'm just trying to get to 5-10 grand a month, it's going to really be amplified if I get to 100 grand or more a month.
Okay. Maybe that's why they say it's bad for someone to win the lottery, because they haven't gone through the self-development to understand how to manage that kind of, it's a life-changing event. It's way outside the scope of experience for most people.
Well, to your question, though, that you brought up, like, what are some things that I went through?
Yeah.
And which may be different from the audience. A first part or first thing that I wish I would have had at the beginning, I didn't get it till later. I invite anybody to check out Positive Intelligence. If you've listened to it or heard about it already, awesome. I believe it was started in Stanford by an individual that they've now put into its own program, but they went through a study around the different sabotaging programs of thought, just boiling it down. What are the most simple version of these programs of thought and what are the simplest number of buckets we can put them into. And there's about 9 that they came up with. And I think my makeup may be different than your makeup, Nathaniel, or somebody else that's listening to it. So I could give them exactly what mine were, but it may not actually map. So I would want them to have a place where they can go to look at what's my map of the ones that are probably most likely to come up. I think that's super important. So if we're just looking at whether it's about business or even just personal life, this has been a really great map for me. So they go through those 9 and they have a real simple test. It takes about 15 minutes. I think it's like 50 to 60 questions that are multiple choice. And they'll spit out on these different 9 buckets, what's the level of each one of those buckets for me, on a scale of 1 to 10. And anything that's about a 6 or above is going to be a little bit more active than the others. I'd say we have aspects of all of those buckets, but like which ones are the ones that are going to get in my way the most? So for me, the top ones that showed up on that chart were an avoider. When stress comes up, do I check out, take a moment, or press pause, only to not come back? So avoider. The other was victim, which I hate that word. I don't like that word at all. Nobody really likes labeling themselves as a victim, but it's essentially I feel at the effect of something that's occurring outside of me, whether it's a person or a circumstance. And then the last one for me was a tie between hyperachiever and pleaser.
Okay.
So hyperachiever is like, look at me, I got this, or, oh, you need some help, let me take that on, and that way I'll get the benefit of the accolade for it, only to find that I end up just putting too much on my plate, and that leads to either burnout or I end up just having to go
there. Yeah, I understand where you're coming
from.
from.
And then I feel bad. The pleaser, I think, is a lot of people can relate to because it's a very common one on people's charts. It's just I get this version where if I go help somebody else, hopefully in turn that will make me feel good, but then it has a vicious cycle where I start to feed other people and not take care of myself. Right.
Yeah,
so
that's an interesting thing
mask
too.
On to help others.
I have found that there's a very fine line between entitlement and gratitude, because if you do favors for people, first they're grateful, right? But if you do it often enough, it becomes an expectation. And then if you say, okay, I need space for myself now because I've given so much, they can get upset at you because you've stopped giving and they started to expect it as just something that's their due. And so it's important to recognize that there's a line that you have to respect. Don't just keep giving and giving and giving.
I just want that to land with the listeners. That's a good piece to bring up, I think, at any level. Some other ones that are outside of those buckets. So you could go to positive intelligence. You can just Google it. It's kind of a mixture of different frameworks that will give you some really interesting base level things to watch out for. And if you go deeper with their stuff, I think they have a book or like a podcast. You can find some different ways to navigate with it. But just knowing my map, I think, was really helpful because I could see the program and realize it's not me, it's just a program. Mm-hmm. Is that going to get in the way? Now, some actual things that made a difference for me. So like I said, I've been in product, software, service-based, physical, like assets, like housing and stuff. There's kind of this thing where we can easily sit in an ivory tower and think up what people want. And I think I know what my customer wants, my client wants, the end user wants. I got to get out of the building. It was one of the things I really learned in software. I was like, I got to get out of this ivory tower I'm thinking in and actually go talk to people that are my ideal that I'm working with. What's in their head? How do they think? What do they say their problem is? What do they say? And I think it's really easy to sit behind a computer and think I know what they want instead of doing the potentially scary thing where I could feel awkward or rejected and go talk to humans. Like, get out of the building right now. Go talk to your potentials just to get in their head.
I struggle with that.
Not to try to sell them anything. I'm just really trying to understand how they think and how they approach things. And somebody on this, comment on the YouTube channel is going to be like, yeah, but how do I go do that? I don't know. Email them and say, hey, I'll give you guys an easy framework. Hey, I'm looking to gather some data on whatever that segment is. Whether it was, like I said, affordable housing providers or contractors or busy moms between 50 to 60 or insert whatever. And if there's a segment you want to serve, just say, I'm looking to gather some data on this. And I thought you might be somebody that could give me some insight. In return, what I'm looking to do is share all the collective feedback in finding ways to solving some of the most interesting and present problems for this subsegment. If you're willing to, I would love to dig a little deep for 10 to 20 minutes together. And in return, share all the results of what it is that we're up to. And in turn, hopefully you can take and run with some of the things we identify and some next steps. Nothing to sell. You can put your credit card in your back pocket. I'm not trying to sell you on anything right this second. that would give me something to go with. And I genuinely would go back to that person and give them insight, a podcast, a book, or something that's related to any of the findings that we have. So don't think immediately I got to go sell them. But by building those relationships, here's what's interesting, is I'm going to get words that come out of their mouth that I might not have come up with in my own marketing, or that would be helpful in the sales pitch, or great if we wrote it on the product. I'm going to build a relationship perhaps with that person. Could they be one of my first customers, beta users, one of the first people when we launched to help not just say yes, but also share it. Another thing that's also good for, it often becomes an open door. And that could be to other, like I had one guy that I went to when we were doing this with software, where he connected me with a relationship to a vendor in the area that all of a sudden now I got 50 people through their network. Would have never saw that coming by building that relationship had I just went to that person and tried to sell them on something. Or so you become a resource that way. So if I look to give first but seek to understand, I'm going to be far more trusted in the marketplace. So that was one of the first mindset pieces that was a huge aha. Now, another thing with, especially around like the income thing, if someone's just getting started, I wouldn't immediately quit W-2 and go into a business. I would look at slowly building the bridge for a safety net. Could I get the side hustle going so that I can see signs of life before I just do the full leap? I need to figure out how to make revenue happen before I burn the ships and find myself in stress and overwhelm, because I've seen that way too many times, and it just doesn't end beautifully. Then I would also say once you actually start and get something going, there's going to be a thermostat. Thermostat is where I'm comfortable that the income is, and it's going to limit things. Found this for myself. Rewind, if I go back years and years ago, there was a thermostat I had set right around like $3,500 a month. It's a single guy, paid all my bills. I could have the housing covered and car payments and just all the basics. And when the income from the business would hit that as my take home, it's like, okay, cool, I don't have to stress. And what happens, just like a thermostat, when we hit the temperature, the system shuts off. If it goes above, right, we get more income, kind of like a thermostat. The heat rises, right? The cool air kicks on if it goes too hot, right?
Yeah.
So you find ways when the income starts to rise, you find ways for it to leave you. You may take your eye off the ball. The opposite's also true. If it starts to dip below what I'm comfortable as, we ramp up again. Oh, we got to get sales. Oh, we got to make this happen, right? So this is kind of interesting when you think of it like a thermostat. If it goes above or below whatever I set it at, something happens. And so if you want more income as a new baseline, we got to raise the thermostat of what we're comfortable as, so that if it dips below that new normal, it kicks something into motion. Or if it goes above that level, we're cognizant that we don't find ways for it to just leave me, that we may instead raise the thermostat. What if this were the new normal? Does that make sense?
So just to clarify, is that just a mental exercise that a person has to make the decision, or how does that work?
I'm going to do this with everybody here listening. The easy way to do this is I would venture to guess there is a number that is comfortable in your checking or savings account.
I would agree.
I don't care what that number is. Like if I threw out a number, $1,000 or $100,000 or something in between or above or below or whatever. There's a number where when it's that number, it's like, oh yeah, cool, that's normal. I logged in. Oh yeah, that's about right. But if it goes way below that, like 50% below that or more, I might freak out. Or if it goes a bit above, I'm like, ooh, okay, interesting. We're doing really good. And you start Googling stuff to go spend it on, right? And it's just like, whoa, interesting. So my invitation to the crowd here that's listening, what if I were to raise the number in the bank account that I chose was the new normal? Just as like my everyday expenses or savings. So that's not even in the business, which we could do as profit and loss, like P&L sort of stuff. But just that exercise alone of looking at your bank account. What I did was when I first was looking at this, I had this comfortability of like $5,000 in the checking account. Now I'd be in a heart attack if that was like, that's all I'm doing. What do you mean $5,000? Granted, different place in life. I'm not like the single 20s guy that I was back then. But it's like it went from $5,000. I remember when I did this, I was like, we're going to make it 10 now. I'm not saying you have to double, but it was enough of a stretch for me of like, I'm going to make sure that is the new normal. And whenever it dipped below that number, I remember having that moment where I'm like, am I going to just normalize this? Because to me, it was way above where it used to be. Or am I actually going to be like I was before when it dipped lower and I was like, it's go time. That's an interesting exercise.
They were talking about this particular topic today because I saw a clip by Daniel Priestley where he talks about he had a boss that wanted to make $100,000 in a year, But he told him, I don't think you're going to be able to do it because you have beliefs around money that aren't going to lend you to being able to do it. So what he had him do is he had him start taking $2,000 in cash around in his pockets so that he could kind of shift his frame around the fact that $2,000 is just pocket change. And I was like, that's a wild thing to have happen. It makes me wonder how useful that exercise was and if it's worth experimenting with the implementation of it.
I hear it all the time, actually, in coaching.
Okay.
Where it's like, wait a minute, you run a, $50 million top line revenue company, yet we're squabbling over here around a $10,000 purchase. And like, you can see the mindset piece come up. It's like, interesting. And yet somewhere else in the business, it's like no big deal. But we're seeing like a real, like, it's not about the number itself so much as what the number represents or means to me, as what I'm comfortable or not comfortable with, how it relates to ROI, how I could see this as a multiplier. And you could drop a number, like drop a 0 or add a 0. It wouldn't matter. It's just, where is that point where I'm starting to get resistance and I'm nitpicky? And I think the penny pincher thing can be really good in some ways, but man, it has a double-edged sword to it. It's like, that can also really limit growth. And walking around with $2,000 in your pockets is going to reveal a lot of like where I used to find resistance and where I now could see this is a pocket change.
It could prevent you from taking advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. I think it was Jesse that said, are you more scared of losing $500 than you are of making 7 figures? That's an interesting question. Wow, maybe I am. So how do I change that? Questions to ask yourself.
I'll ask you, Nathaniel, since I know this exercise, like, what frame of thought and what played out after having that in your head of like, am I more committed to moving towards 7 figures or more committed to not losing that 500? And what played out for you after?
I thought about it and I was like, well, if I am actually more scared of losing $500 than I am of earning, like excited about earning 7 figures, I will never take the actions required to make it there. And so I have to change that fear, or at least even if the fear is there, I have to act anyway. And that's what the definition of courage is. Sometimes you have to remember those things in order to make the decision. Hopefully that's helpful to someone that's going through that moment right now. Be brave. You got this.
I like where your head's at on this. I would say it's a great exercise because there's a big dynamic, change between something that's 7 figures and something that's 3 figures. Okay, so it's a big juxtaposition. But I don't think it weights the pain and pleasure response that humans have. And I'll bring it up that, like, as humans, we logic a lot of things, but underneath the surface, and Tony Robbins talks a lot about this, it's like we're basically these marionettes that just get pulled and pushed. You have humans moving towards something pleasurable or away from pain. And I would say the stick hits harder than the carrot.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying it's 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, but I would just let everybody know the stick hits harder than the carrot pulls. So in general, whether it was like, you could put a 0 on, what about $10 million? Would you move towards that versus lose 500? I'm not sure at what point does the pull actually move more than the carrot, or as a carrot than it does as a stick. But be mindful that if I could just know that that's what's going on, how could I use it to my advantage? How could I put a stick in place that moves me in a direction?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I did with my exercise habit was that if I failed to hit a day for some reason, I made the commitment that I had to get on the camera and tell everyone, hey, I didn't show up today. And there was enough of an embarrassment deterrent that it kept me honest. So that's really useful to be able to identify that sometimes you need a stick to propel yourself. I think that the thing you guys taught at this event that we did in Salt Lake was also very useful. There's a difference between the stories we tell ourselves and the actual facts surrounding something.
Yes.
So just having that framework of thought allowed me to kind of identify some of the stories that I tell myself.
This is a big piece that could be its own seminar just for days on end. It's just that difference between, here are some facts that are inarguable that are showing up, and then there's my story about the facts, the perception of how I see it, the angle that I'm coming to it with. And that story consists of a lot of things. It's like my past, my beliefs, whether empowering or limiting. It's my value set. It's my culture background, my peer network of conversation, my insert a lot of different things. There's a lot.
Your predictions about what might happen in the future.
100%. Yeah, my preconceived ideas and how it should play out, or would play out, and might play out. There's a lot in there. And the ability to separate just raw facts and look at it like it's cold, dead, lifeless, like a set of things, as simple as, like right now I'm looking at the clock, it's 11:51. Okay, in this time zone, it's 11:51. Like if everyone looked around and was like, is it 11:51? Okay, great, awesome. But if just one person was like, well, I'm kind of hungry right now, I don't know, it feels more like noon. It's like, whoa, we didn't fast forward 8 minutes on purpose just because you felt like it. It's like, no, it's 11:51. When it hits 12, then maybe it's lunchtime. And that change from letting my story, that perception, take the show and to just stop and go, it is 11:51 and it means nothing, is a huge life-changing ability, because here's what can happen. So things that are stressful in business, frustrating, anxiety-ridden, can now just simply be, it is. It's just things. Because I'm letting go of the attachment of my story to just be with what is. It is this. Like I've been sued. I've had a letter come in the mail. So-and-so from this place. Okay, you're taking this court. Okay, we're going to. And all of a sudden you're like, well, how many zeros are on that thing? And what's that going to mean? And all of a sudden the story's going, but what's real? Okay. Looking at this envelope, this person sent this letter. Inside has these words. It just is. And I don't even know if anyone's listening to this and able to really grasp that if you sat with the difference between where my story is taking me and just what is, could be the difference between me staying up all night, stomach in knots, energy totally thrown off, like just in complete breakdown, or just simply being like, yeah, just a letter.
I know the difference firsthand.
And if you can cultivate that, what a superpower you can create in your life. It's really hard because once the emotional bus ride's got you and it's taken you, it's really hard to get off the bus ride. Because it's both psychological as well as chemical. We have like a producing of these chemical bathings that become emotions that we're experiencing. It's hard to just shut it off. Anyone that's been super angry and worked up knows you can't just turn it off with nothing. Oh yeah, back to, I'd probably be a psychopath at that point if I could just turn it off on a dime. So there is a bit of coming down and letting go so that the emotional chemical bathing stops. I can come back to center. But if you can catch that, man, that is a life changer.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's life-changing because I had a story that I told myself for years. And even when I was assaulted and my face was crushed, I was convinced that I deserved it because I had told this story to myself that I was a bad person. And it wasn't until I finally faced the shadow in my life that I realized that I wasn't a bad person. It was just a story that I had interpreted a series of events about, and my interpretation was wrong when I first made it when I was like 10 or 11 years old. And it carried with me for so many years until I finally was able to look at it directly, realize that this is just a story, not a fact. And it changed everything.
Now, let me break this down with everybody here, because I know me and you have talked about this. You've worked a lot with this, so you're in a different place with it. But somebody listening may still be at the effect of something that went on that was very traumatic in their early experience. And they may still be dealing with the effects of it today. What happened in your circumstance? There was a series of things that we could arguably come to of like, okay, I said this or did this. I didn't do this. I didn't say this. Okay, this person's fist, my face. Like there's very specific things. But then there's all of what you were just talking about, what I felt, what I made it mean in the moment and ongoing. Now, also, here's what's interesting. Because you're a little kid, you don't have the full mental capacity of an adult at that moment too, so you're still trying to grasp and make sense of, which you might see differently had you been a fully grown adult. Another piece is the time that you carried with feeling and experiencing and having that same occurrence again and again in your mind. So you get not just sunken cost bias, which is a psychological term of how much time and energy and money and stuff like go into something, and the more that we invest in that, so to speak, over time, the harder it is for us to let it go like it's no big deal. Like, oh, I'm just nothing about it now. What do you mean I'm nothing about it now? I spent decades at the effect of that trauma, right? I can't just let that go. But what if I could? So that's one piece, sunken cost bias. Another is how many times that part of your mind has wired together and you've thought about it, you've ruminated on it. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this. Thoughts that fire together, wire together. Those networks or neural frameworks become more and more accessible, so they're much easier for us to go back down that framework.
Myelinated channels.
So it takes longer for us to, over time, stop wiring that together for it to actually drift apart. We're not getting a lobotomy. No one's cutting that off and throwing it in the garbage. it's going to take some time for that to not be the place that my mind goes down about the old story. It's going to take longer for me to let that go than maybe even wiring the new story too. And the reason I say new story is just because there's story doesn't mean it's bad. It's just which of those paradigms, perceptions serve me and which ones are not. And there is a way to use that for your benefit. Like you said, what if I were to rewrite what showed up and use that to my benefit? The mind's going to make up meaning either way. We can't shut that off. I don't know a single person that's just a robot and goes around life not making any perception or meaning about something that's showing up.
Yeah.
Some do better than others, but if I were to use that to my advantage, I could audit which ones don't serve me, insert something new about how could this serve me.
Well, I think that's actually a really important point, is that you can't just cut it out. You do have to replace it with something new.
I agree. Nature abhors a vacuum.
Yeah.
It'll fill itself with something. Far better that I be intentional about what goes in there. And so if what occurred and the emotional impact and what I felt in some moment, and this could go really deep. I mean, we're touching on things that could take years of therapy for some folks.
Yeah.
But instead of revisiting what happened in the old paradigm, what would be possible if I could let it go of how I perceived it for the potential of a new possibility of story, a way of seeing it that could serve me.
I don't know how this would work for everybody else, but the thing that I did is I discovered that we have a mechanism that we use in our everyday life called suspension of disbelief. It's when we watch a fictional story, like a movie or reading a book, and something impossible happens, but we set aside our disbelief of that impossibility for a time just for the sake of progressing the narrative. So, for example, I like to give is like Harry Potter, magic isn't real, but we accept the premise that it is real in the story so that the story can continue. And I realized that I could hijack that mechanism to tell myself a new story about how I believed in myself. And that was hard to do because I had all these old patterns at first, but the more I practiced it, the better it got. And I was able to use it as this tool to suspend my disbelief of my own self-worth and replace it with a version of myself that I believed in. And so if that is useful to anybody that's listening, I highly encourage you to go through that exercise and use it to get around the problems that you have or the stories you're telling yourself.
So good.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we end the interview today?
Well, I know we didn't dig deep on the business side of things, but I would say it's a byproduct. Like who I'm being and how I show up in some of what we talked about in navigating who I could be will serve in that value exchange that goes on in the marketplace. So whether I'm in real estate or I got software or service or I'm providing physical products that are being shipped to people, the person, like the version of who you're being as the leader, the CEO, a partner, a team member, like that matters more for the long haul. Because I could start something, get something kind of going. I'm going to be the biggest bottleneck between where I'm at and where I want to be. And the faster I get ahead of some of that stuff about who I'm being, the faster the real value exchange can start showing up. And I do say exchange because like there's a lot of people that give a lot of value and don't get a lot back. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I want to find a way that we're getting compensated for the market.
Well, and
I could
there's
go on
a lot
this
of
for
utility
hours, but
for
maybe
that.
we could do a deep dive on another one coming up at some point here where we could just talk business. But today we talk mostly about the version of you as leader.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important for people to identify because it's all part of building that life and that business that you don't want to retire from. And so you have to be able to identify what is the person you want to become so you can identify the steps that you need to take to become that person. Well, I really appreciate it. I think you've given us a lot of value today. One of the things that really helped me from this event was considering what the 8-figure version of myself would look like, who that person is, how he shows up in his business every day, the kinds of things he doesn't do, and just the general aspects of that person I'm looking to become. And I really appreciate that you guys provided that at the event that we did. Now, I also like to say thank you to all of the listeners. I really appreciate everyone who tunes into this show every week as we release these episodes. I love to hear your feedback. If there's other topics you'd like to hear us talk about, let me know in the comments or send me a message. And I just want to say thanks, guys. I appreciate you. This has been the Pot of Gold podcast. We talk about wealth generation, finances, real estate investing, and how you can build a life that you don't want to retire from. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.